and welcome you to the second webinar for data providers organized by data.europa Academy. The topic of today is understanding open data, technical openness. Here you can see our speakers and moderators for today, Giuseppe Ascone-Modica, who is part of data.europa.eu team and who will hopefully join soon. And we have, you're back, perfect.
I am back.
You can continue.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Julia, for filling in. I hope everyone can hear me correctly. I had some issues with my Wi-Fi. So yes, I will be your moderator for today. My name is Giuseppe Ascone-Modica. I'm part of the data.europa.eu team. I'm a knowledge management assistant, and my work focuses on advancing and supporting open data practices across the EU institutions, agencies, and bodies. And I will be your moderator for today. First, we have Benjamin Ditwold. Since 2012, is working as a researcher at the Fraunhofer Institute of Open Communication System, also called FOCUS, where he leads projects in the areas of open data, data infrastructures, and smart cities. He gained his knowledge of open data by leading the technical implementation of the data portal for Germany called GovData, but also data.europa.eu and the support center for data sharing. Since 2021, he's leading the open service engineering group at Fraunhofer FOCUS. Next, we have Lena Burns, also from the technical team of Fraunhofer FOCUS since 2017. She's primarily involved in projects related to data and digital strategy. Together with Benjamin, she supports and advises federal states, member states, local authorities on the topics of open data, data qualities, smart city strategies, and scalable data infrastructure. Last but not least, we have our external expert, Jacob Klimek. He's an assistant professor at the School of Computer Science, Charles University in Prague, and received his PhD in 2013. He's also working for the Ministry of Interior of the Czech Republic since 2015 in the role of linked and open data expert. He's an author of a number of data specifications, ensuring open data interoperability, and is a technical lead of the Czech National Open Data Catalog and the Czech Open Data Portal. Next slide, please. So for today, we will talk about, again, this is the opening, and then we're going to have Lena first and then Benjamin introducing us to open data, data format issues, and how to reach better technical openness for data providers. Because as a reminder, this is specifically tailored for all the data providers as part of our data providers webinar series. Then we're going to have a short Q&A sessions where you can post them your questions. Then we're going to have our external expert with a more hands-on approach. We're going to have the best practitioner from data providers from the perspective of someone that works inside the Ministry of Interior of the Czech Republic. We're going to have another Q&A session, and then we're going to close this webinar. Now I hand over, now we have the rules of the game. So the rules of the game are really simple, but it's good to follow them. So this webinar will be recorded, as is already being recorded right now. Please make sure to mute yourself during the webinar so that there's no confusion with the other speakers. And really important, do reserve 3 minutes after this webinar to help us improve. We do these webinars for you, so that the more you tell us about your experience, the more we can improve these webinars and make them the best that we can give you. Last but not least, it's really important that you use Slido. I will show you the link now. To vote your questions that are more interested in you and pose your own questions. This is how you access the Slido. So now in the chat, there should be posted a link to where you can access it through your browser, but you can also go on the Slido website or scan the QR code and insert the word technical openness. In that way, you access the Slido where you can ask questions, vote your favorite questions, and interact with the speakers. So perfect. Now go to Slido, enter technical openness, and then we can start this presentation with our lovely Lena and Benjamin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. So we will start with our first section. It's the introduction to open data. But before we start with the actual content, we would first like to to ask you a question about data formats. I have an echo right now, so can everyone mute themselves? Thanks. So we would like to know, what data formats do you usually work with? So are you working with Excel files, PDFs, is it Word documents, RDF, or whatever you are usually working with? This is interesting for us because data formats are strongly connected to technical openness, and later on we will learn about what data formats are actually appropriate for technical openness and which are less appropriate. So maybe we wait 1 minute so that everyone can write down, and then Benjamin, you can tell the results.
Yeah, of course. I see already that we receive some words. We have a competition between 2 or 3 favorite formats. It's changing a bit. Okay, I believe I can start talking about a bit that. So it's changing while I speak. Right now we find different formats already, but very prominent. We have Excel, or mostly Excel or CSV, PDF. These are the big words on the tech cloud. But there's also more technical stuff like JSON, SQL, shapefiles from the geo section, and also some kind of link data. So we also see RDF and TTL, Autodesk. So these are all formats you will hear also later in our presentation, and where we go into and can give you our experiences when it's good to use some of those and on which circumstances you should consider using others. But I believe so. It's still changing, but the top 3 are Excel, PDF, or top 2. There's also Word. But I believe we can continue.
Okay, thanks a lot. So, and thanks for participating. If you have any further questions, you can use Slido to ask them, and then later in the question section, we will come back to them. So now let's start with, what does open and open data and actually mean? So basically we have 2 different perspectives. We have the legal perspective and the technical perspective. So from a legal perspective, openness means that data can be used by anyone without any restriction or limitation. So that basically means that you can process the data, you can change the data, you can share the data. And this would actually be the best case. Sometimes you have within open data licenses, which makes you say the name of the creator. But in general, one can say the legal perspective of openness means that data can be freely accessed and used in the way you want. Now this webinar is about technical openness, so we have to talk about the technical perspective. So from a technical side, openness means that data is available in a non-proprietary format. And that means that the format given is open, so that no special program is required for its use, and no costs are incurred for its usage. Secondly, it means that data is machine readable. So that basically means that you can automatically process the data with software. And then data has to be accessed without restrictions. So that means that you can go to a portal, you can directly download the data, and you do not have to go through any authorization process, enter any password or whatever. So this is what we mean with technical openness. Now let's talk about different degrees of technical openness. We want to introduce to you the 5-star model of Tim Berners-Lee. It's the so-called inventor of the World Wide Web. Probably some of you already know this 5-star model, but still we would like to introduce it. What's very important, we have 5 different levels. So this is why it's called a 5-star model. And the levels are cascading. So in order to reach a new level, all previous levels must be fulfilled. So let's have a look at the first level. So you will get 1 star in the 5-star model if you make your data available on the web under an open license. So this again would be the legal perspective of open data. So and for this first star, it does not matter in which format you make your stuff available. Just make it available for other people under an open license. So for reaching 2 stars, you need to fulfill the first level, plus you make your data available as structured data. So for example, instead of using an image scan of the table, you would just make available the Excel file. And that has the advantage for a user that they can directly process it or export it to other formats. The next level, to reach it, you need to fulfill the first and the second level, plus you make your data available in a non-proprietary format. For example, instead of using Excel, you would make it available in a CSV file, so that users do not need any proprietary software in order to process your data. The next level to reach, you need to fulfill all levels before, and then you need to use unique resource identifiers to denote things so that other people can point at your data. So they can link to the data from any other place, they can bookmark it or reuse only parts of it. And the very last level, it's quite technical, it's linked data. So when you're linking your data to other data to provide content and you fulfill the first to the 4th level, then you will get the 5 stars. And the advantage for the user is that they can discover more related data when they consume your own data. And also they are able to learn directly about your data scheme. So much about the different degrees of openness. We will come back in a couple of minutes and then we talk about which level would be a good start for you in order to improve your technical openness. But first, we would like to show you some frequent excuses or reasons data publishers often give for having data in low technical openness. So from our experience, basically, there are 2 common excuses or reasons. First is lack of time. So data publishers often think that it is very time consuming to prepare the data so that they have a better technical openness. Later on, especially when it's about the question how to make a CSV out of your Excel, we can show you that in most cases, it's not that time consuming. And the other reason is simply a lack of knowledge. Many publishers simply don't know how to improve the technical openness or maybe have never heard of technical openness. And both reasons somehow are related. So if they don't have the time, they won't gain the knowledge. And on the other side, if they don't have the knowledge, they still think it's like a very fuzzy topic. It's hard to get into it and they don't have the time for that. So now we move on to the next section. It's a quite short section and we would like to show you why technical openness is an important topic by showing you a short story of a potential data user, which is a bit frustrating for her. Let's have a look. So this is Jane. Jane is a software developer and Jane is currently pregnant. She lives in Berlin and unfortunately for her, it is really hard to find midwives in Berlin. So she is searching in different web pages. She is running from place to place, trying really hard to find a midwife. And while she's doing so, she has the idea of developing a map application that directly shows midwives with capacity next to her location. And she thinks that would be helpful for other pregnant woman, and she's really eager to develop this web application. So in order to get the data of midwives, she uses data.europa, and she is searching for the term midwives. And indeed, she is very happy to find a list of addresses of midwives. And as you can see, the list is available in CSV and Excel. So she's even more happy because she assumes that the data is machine readable and she can process it easily for her purposes. But when she opens the file, she finds something like this. So it is a machine readable format, but the content itself, as you can see, it's not structured in a tabular way. And it is really hard for her to process it. Actually, she can't process it automatically. She would have to invest a lot of effort in order to put the data in tabular form so that she can make any use of it. But as Jane is a very busy developer, she does not have the time in order to clean this data. And so her dream of a map application for finding midwives burst, and the map will not get developed. So this is really just a very short user story that hopefully shows you that little technical openness can prevent data users from using your data, and it can also prevent nice applications from being developed. So now let's move on. What can you actually do in order to improve the technical openness of your data? There are some steps you could do, and we will go through them. First of all, you could start introducing a data management in your organization. So introducing a data management in your organization can be both on a strategic level and also on an operational level. We will have a look at both, starting with the strategic level. And there we talk about data governance. I guess most of you have already heard the term data governance. It's basically describing specifications and also rules for handling data throughout its life cycle. And the aim of data governance is basically to create a clear and functioning framework. And the data governance can apply to different areas. So for example, it could be standards for data quality in your organization, or standards and rules for how to maintenance your data, for topics like data privacy and data compliance. So it's quite a very broad topic, and we won't do a deep dive because that would be an own webinar, I guess. What's most important for you to know is that you need concrete tasks, concrete roles and responsibilities, so that everyone in your organization knows who is in the lead, who has the responsibility in order to perform the data governance. And as it might be a bit fuzzy for you right now, we brought some example roles. So roles can be on the strategic level, it can also be on the operative level. And what's probably most important, it can be individual roles as well as boards or committees like a data board. Again, we won't go into detail what the responsibility on each of those roles are or could be. It's just example roles that you get a first idea of what we are talking about when we say you need to introduce different roles for introducing data governance to your organization. And most important is that depending on the size and the complexity of your organization, the types and also the numbers of roles you need may vary. And also you should only introduce roles and responsibilities that really reflect the needs of your organization. So if you are working in a very small organization, you really don't need that many roles. It might be enough to have a data board and maybe data steward and technical steward. But if it's a large organization, it might make sense to, for example, introduce a metadata manager or governance manager. And what's also important to know is that when you start introducing roles to your organization, don't do it abruptly, but rather test them out in, for example, prioritized areas in form of pilot projects. And then you can have a look if the roles you have chosen, if they are actually fulfilling the needs of your organization and if they make sense or you need to adapt them. Okay, what else can you do to introduce data management on a strategic level? You could start build competencies, so your own competencies, but also for your employees, meaning only if people know about technical openness and how to improve it, they can actually perform so. So if they don't have the knowledge, they won't be able to really publish high quality data, technical openness data. So for this, we would like to introduce to you the data quality guidelines. These are the results of a project launched by the Publications Office in 2019. And the aim of the project was to analyze major quality issues, and from these results derived recommendations for data providers on how to actually provide better quality data. So you can find a link on the bottom right corner where you can download the data quality guidelines free of charge. And they basically consist of 3 parts. So we have one part for the data analysis, where we identified most common quality issues. Then you can learn something about different data quality dimensions, indicators, and how to calculate the quality of your data and metadata. And then most important, there are the recommendations for delivering high quality data. And the topic of technical openness is also a topic of quality. So you will learn also about technical openness in the data quality guidelines. And if you have any feedback regarding this publication or any questions, you can reach out to the given email address. So next, we are still at the point where we say you could introduce the data management in your organization, but now we have moved from the strategic level to the more operational level. And as we have learned, data needs to be carefully prepared before publication. Otherwise, we would have a very sad developer chain, as I just showed to you. And the preparation of data is quite an interactive and agile process. And the process consists basically of 6 different phases you can see here. I won't go into detail on each phase. If you want to learn more about them, the data preparation process is also introduced in the data quality guidelines I showed to you on the last slide. So for more information, just have a look in there. And in the guidelines, you will also find recommendations for each phase. So maybe just a very brief go through each phase. So in the profiling phase, it's basically about discovering and understanding your data. In the distilling phase, it's about refining your data and also the structuring and cleansing of your data. And this is a phase which was missed with the midwife list I just showed to you. Then we have the enriching phase where you can augment your data. We have the documenting phase. There you could, for example, document data usage recommendation. And also it's about the versioning of data. Afterwards, there's the validating phase, which is about assessing data quality. And in the end, in the publication phase, it's about publishing your data in an open and machine-readable format. But as I said, for any details, please have a look at the data quality guidelines. Okay, what else can you do in order to improve the technical openness of your data? You could start choosing appropriate file formats. And at this point, we go back to our 5-star model. And yeah, you might wondering now, what would be a good level to start with? So for the 5-star level and the 4-star level, it's a bit more technical. You need a bit more technical background. So our recommendation is, if you're a beginner in the topic of technical openness, please aim at the 3-star level. So make your data available under an open license in a structured form and in a non-proprietary format. That would be a very good starting point. So the question is, what basically are appropriate file formats in order to reach technical openness? So basically there are 2 criteria. The first criteria is the format has to be machine readable. And here you can see a list of machine readable formats. Some of them are totally machine readable, others are predominantly machine readable. And the second criteria would be that the file format has to be an open one. Here you can see a list of non-proprietary formats. And if you consider now both criteria, you can find that CSV, JSON, XML, and RDF are very good formats for technical openness. And you should really try to publish your data in some of these 4 formats. On the other hand, PDF, docx, ODT, and the others mentioned here in the red box, they are not recommended because they are non-proprietary or not machine readable. So please try to avoid publishing your data in one of these formats. Okay, so much about the theory. Let's have a look at some real figures. We brought a table to you. And this table will indicate the frequency of different file formats in data.europa EU. So in the first column, you will see in a second different file formats. We just reduced the list to very common formats, and we excluded special formats like statistical or geospatial formats. In the second column, you will see how many data sets are available in this format. And then later on, you can also see whether they are open formats, machine readable formats, and how many stars you could achieve with the format. So here's the list. And as you can see, topmost format offered on data.europa EU are CSV and JSON. We are very happy about that because, as we just learned, these are recommended formats for technical openness. They are machine readable and they are also open. And also we find some data sets in XML and also some in RDF, which is like the most technical advanced format, as you can reach 5 stars with them. We would be even more happy if there would be more RDF files, but still it's very good to have so many CSV and JSON already on data.europa EU. On the other hand, we can also find some of the formats which are not recommended, for example, PNG, TIFF, PDF, and also lots of Excel files. And we have learned that CSV would be a better way to publish your data than in Excel. And this is why on the next few slides, we would like to show to you how to convert your Excel to CSV. And I think this is very good for you to learn, as we have seen in the Slido survey that many people of you are using Excel. So let's have a look on how to convert it to CSV. For this, we will first give a short introduction in the structure of a CSV file. So if you have a very simple file open in Excel, it might look like this. You have the table header in the first row, and our data consists here of 2 columns. We have 1 column for the city name and 1 column for the population size. So quite easy. And opened as a CSV file, the same data would look like this. So basically it's still tabular data, but it's now like text-based. So you can open it in a text editor. But it has quite the same structure. So you can find the table header at the very first line, followed by the content data. And in CSV, you use a comma for separating the different cells. So that's basically the structure of a CSV file. And in order to prepare your data for converting it from Excel to CSV, you need to consider some things. So only one table sheet in Excel can be transferred to CSV at once. So if your file consists of more than one table sheets, you either need to merge them if they have the same structure, for example, or you need to create different CSV files for each table sheet in your Excel. Then what's also quite important, the file must only contain the table header and the content data, like we've just seen on the slide before. And each row must follow the same structure given by the table header. So a little example, it's in German, but I think it's totally fine serving as an example. When this is our Excel file, we can see in yellow the table header and in green the content data. And basically following the second point here on the left side of the slide, it means all other lines or rows have to be deleted. So first of all, there's also a problem because there are more than one table sheet, and then you have some additional lines like blank lines and also additional headlines which have to be removed. And also there are some calculated columns which have a different structure than our table header in yellow. So this is also problematic and needs to be removed. And also you can see in white the different separators for different years. This is also problematic. So you are not able to transform this Excel file directly into CSV. It should rather look something like this. As I just said, you just have one table header at the very first row, and then followed by the content data. You, in this example, we also put a additional column for the year, so that you can remove all additional lines which are not the content data. And if your Excel file looks something like this, it's really quite easy. Afterwards, you just go to the Save As dialog, and there you can just choose CSV UTF-8, and yeah, that's basically it. You have converted your Excel file to CSV. Okay, so what else can you do in order to improve the technical openness of your data? You can make use of tooling. Benjamin, would you like to take over?
Yes, of course. So when you begin with that, you may, as we said, there are several formats that are a bit more fit to purpose on those and should be used considering or over others. And you may want to use, as already shown, file format converters. So from PDF to Excel, or convert something else to RDF to step into, if you're capable of, into the semantic world and achieve 4 stars or 5 stars, for examples. And there are free and commercial tools to use for. And then you probably, and this is what we experience a lot, you need somehow to clean your data. So there you need cleansing tools. That helps you to clean your data from quality issues. Just looking at the CSV files, so we see there's a chat already going on about that file format, a comma separated value, which can also be, there's not a comma that separates the elements, but maybe auch a semicolon or a tabular. And depending on where you're from, this may cause issues. So you may have to change this and clean your data with that. There are also free tools to use. And then lastly, there are also tools you can use for checking the quality of your metadata and of your data. So there are 3 tools to use. So also for your files, if you have an XML and there's a schema and you can apply this, and also for the meta information and some other stuff. And on data.europa, we are providing one of those tools for you in order to check your metadata quality and soon also parts of your data quality, for example, CSV files. So if you're on the portal and you see the screen, the start page of data.europa, and then you can click on the data section and go to metadata quality. And what you then see is the metadata quality assurance, which gives you an analysis of the quality. And we created a score and the methodology you can look into. It's also linked on the portal. And there you can see an overall quality of the page of the metadata and the complete portal. You see the few buttons at the top. And you also see below that, here's a screenshot from several cards that show you different dimensions and where we measure metadata quality. And for example, the complete rating evolution at the point where we took the screenshot was in the overall portal sufficient. And you can see some more details also in these dimensions. For example, if we look into interoperability, we can see that only 21% of the given metadata and of the data sets are from a format or media type that is from a vocabulary. So a moderated list of formats. For example, you can consider, we already saw this in the poll, that we have there Excel, XLSX, or Excel and CSV, but actually they all mean .xlsx or file format. And to be specific on that, it's recommended to use vocabularies. And this is quite good. More than 50% of the data sets are machine readable. So machine readable in that case means you may have provided your data as PDF, but alongside with that, you also provided this with a CSV file or an Excel file, XML file or something like that. But this gives you an overall overview of the complete portal. You may are more interested in what can I do and how does it help me for my own portal as where I'm the provider from. And if you go on the next slide, you can see that if you click on the catalog button, you can search and look for your portal. And if you find your portal, you can see exactly the same picture we saw before for your portal. So we would see that on the next slide, yes. And you can see all the ratings and dimensions for your portal. And also you see in the upper sections with the badges, as we are also checking the compliance of your data sets to data.apa, which is the file format and structure that should be used for providing metadata. We can tell you, is it compliant or is it not compliant? And when it's not, where are the issues you may have to look at? And also we are checking all of the referenced files and see if they are accessible or not from a technical perspective. And there you can also see these files of yours are not accessible anymore because they may moved or put somewhere else. And then this is something you can look into. Considering that, we hope this is a help for you, and this is a tool that gets further developed all the time. And I believe now we can go into the question and answer section. And we do already have a lot of questions. And I would like to go through them. So the first question was, are not metadata also important for even a higher level of openness? This question came in during we presented a 5-star model. And of course it is, but the 5-star model is not addressing this. So it does not say it's not important, it's just focusing on the data itself. But besides that, of course, metadata is really important because it makes the data findable. Without metadata, that wouldn't be possible. Then we have I'm sorry, I believe no. Is datasets publishing in compressed file formats like zip a good practice? I already mentioned data.AP, and data.AP is the specification that you should use if you provide your metadata. And data.AP also provides a property where you can indicate that the attached or the assigned or referenced data is provided in a compressed format. So yeah, this is handled and this could be done. This is no problem. Then we have the question, who's responsible to create, manage, or anchor national or European data models or specifications? So I was talking about data.AP. This originates from the World Wide Web Consortium, and they created a standard or specification, I believe it's a recommendation, which is called DCAT. And the European Commission, especially there's the CEMIC group, and they are responsible for dcat-AP, which is a application profile that is compliant to DCAT, and this is handled by the CEMIC group. But there's also a working group. If you're interested in that, you can apply for this, and there are regular meetings where you can shape the DCAT-AP specification. And this also goes down in several member states for an application profile for those member states. So we do have dcat-ap.de for Germany or .it for Italy. So this all is available and can be done. Following that, all of those deeper application profiles need to be compliant also to the higher levels of this profile. And then we have, as a data provider with closed formats, where should I start to change this in my organization? I will wait for some more thumbs up of this question because this was question we got before we went into the organizational stuff in our presentation and already provided hints and tips and recommendations on how exactly to do that. So if this question receives a lot of more thumbs up and you think it wasn't answered, then we can talk again about that. Then we have the question, what about NetCDF and HDF5 formats? I have to admit, I do not know about all formats. Meanwhile, I did a quick look for those, and it looks like they are machine readable and they are from non-governmental organizations, so I believe they are open. So from my feeling, I would consider them as okay, but I'm no expert in those because actually I don't know them. If any one of the other speakers may have an idea about that, I'm happy to hear this. Which insights or innovations have been created by usage of data from the European Data Portal? Do you have any use cases? Maybe Giuseppe, I would like to hand over this question to you.
Hello, yes. I can answer this question by referring you to
Giuseppe, we lost you?
Yes.
I think.
I
Okay, I can
we
take
have
all.
Wi-Fi.
Hello, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, so we do organize something that is extremely related to the creativity of our users and how they use open data from our portal. This is the Datathon. So we organize this every year. This actually occurred yesterday. There was the Datathon 2022. And what happens is, according to several challenges, and this year were the Green Deal, the Europe Fit for the Digital Age, and public procurement, companies and startups and young people use open data to build their applications. So the open data comes directly from our portal, data.europa.eu. So I think that is the best indication of why, how our portal helps developing of applications or actually useful for creativity and entrepreneurship.
Thanks a lot. Then we have a question, can we have a list of CCAN data hub plugins you use in Data Europa? We would give you if there were some. Data Europa EU is not based on CCAN, it's a different implementation. But it's open source, and I just pasted the link to the public repository to that. So there's no CCAN used. What is recommended syntax for URIs? So that is quite a big topic. You should need to consider if you're using resources or URIs they should be stable. So think of what are stable parts of this URI. Use HTTP for those, and consider also, if you can, this is not necessary, but it's always good practice, that those URIs are resolvable. So if you describe a resource with the URI, it's always good that this could also be used as a URL, which means if you would click on it in a browser, you can see an HTML representation of the resource you have described, maybe somewhere else. So this is always a good practice. But you can find a lot of other best practices. I just put a link here to the W3 best practices of using and how to use URIs. Hope that helps you. How many datasets in Data Europa are available through APIs? It's actually a question not really easy to answer. First off, just to avoid misunderstandings or confusion, any data set, so the metadata and then the assigned data, is available also or discoverable on Data Europa EU also via APIs. But I assume this question relates to the actual data that is provided in the meta as API. And this we cannot exactly tell you, because we can only tell you what is provided to us in the metadata. So if there's given a hint as a format is called API, which is actually not that the best practice, then we could tell you. But this is not done always, so it's not easy for us to provide you an answer with that. But, and this I believe also will answer another question that I already saw. DCAT and then DCAT AP introduces data services. And while it's currently hard to implement them because there's a bit of discussion going on how to implement data services on DCAT AP because it's slightly different from DCAT. We will consider those, and they are already introduced also in Data Europa. So you can look at this. You can see this if you're on the search page of Data Europa for the data sets. You can also see that there are data services on the facets, but it is not yet broadly used by the portal or data providers. But this is something we hope that will gain more interest.
We should do one more last question before we hand over to Jacob.
Okay. Who's entitled to get access to Data Europa EU? Everyone in Europe that is interested in data, maybe also wants to provide data, get in contact with us. And this is for everyone.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for this really interesting questions. I also see there is more questions that have been asked even right now. It's really nice to have an audience that is active and wants to interact with our speakers. Now we move on to our hands-on part of the presentation, where we have our expert Jacob talking about the best practices for data provider. Thank you, Jacob. You may share your slides, and Dina, you may stop.
Right.
Fantastic.
Can you see my slide? Just a quick check.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Hello, my name is Jakub Klimek, and before I get to what I have to tell you today, I need to explain that actually I'm wearing multiple hats today. With my first hat, I'm an open data publisher, consumer, and researcher at the Charles University. And with my second hat, I'm also an open data publisher and consumer, but at the Ministry of the Interior. And with my third hat, I'm actually part of the team of the National Open Data Coordinator at the Ministry. So today I'll share my insights into the open data ecosystem from all these points of view. So I hope that it will be always clear from or with which hat I'm talking. And in the previous presentation, we could see that it is really important for data published as open data to be published in an open data format with an open data or just an open license, so that we can say, yes, this is open data. But also we could see that this is just one piece of the entire puzzle. And typically the open data publishing activity within an organization is a layered thing with multiple roles, tasks assigned, and responsibilities, of course, so that the whole activity is clearly defined. Everyone knows what to do and what they are responsible for. So what we already talked about are the data formats and licensing. And today I'll share my insights into the other layers of the process. Today, mainly the technical ones and some of the cross-cutting ones, such as motivation and processing of feedback. Those will be things that I think are not discussed enough when talking about the technical side of open data. So it should complement what was already said. And I'll start with the actual motivation of a data publisher to publish open data, why they should do it, and what should motivate them. Historically, data publishers who wanted to publish open data did it basically voluntarily, because they thought that there is someone out there on the web who would benefit from their data and who could do something interesting with it. With the recent updates of the EU legislation, gradually there are more and more publishers of open data whose motivation is that they need to do it because it is in the legislation, and therefore sometimes they kind of lose sight of why actually it is in the legislation and what should be the goal of each and every data publisher. So the goal of the publisher, the primary goal, is to publish their data for others to use. So this may include financial profit of others. Someone does something interesting with open data and they profit from it financially because the app is popular, or they add some advertising and so on. So those are all benefits of the open data users and not necessarily of the data publisher. But this is okay. This is the goal of publishing open data, to make others use it and use it well. And if they make profit of it, it means that the data is useful, and that should be the primary satisfaction of the open data publisher. There are, of course, exceptions. There are ways from which the actual data publisher can profit. One of those ways is dog fooding, which means that the publisher itself uses the data they publish as open data internally instead of actually passing some data from, let's say, one department to another internally. They tell the other department, we already published this data, use it. And therefore, when there is some problem with the published data, it gets fixed, because otherwise the data would not be used by the other department in this case. And therefore, the quality of the data improves for everyone. Also, publishing useful data is good for PR. So that's also something that should be profitable for the data publisher. And in some cases, the publisher may profit from arranging a better SLA, service level agreement, with some prominent data user who maybe needs some above standard access to the published data. But in any case, the goal remains the same. It is for to publish the data in a way that is easily usable by others. And one point here is that the actual usage of the data is often unknown to the publisher and even unknowable, because a valid use case for open data is when, let's say, someone in some company downloads the data set and uses it for something useful. But since it is basically usage in a private enterprise, no one tells anyone about this usage, and therefore the publisher doesn't know that the data is being used and by who and for what. But that doesn't change the fact that it is being used. Another case for that can be schools and universities who use lots of data, let's say for teaching, but they do not report about it. And one last point about the unknowable usage of data to the publisher. One of the goals of open data is open data reuse, which means that one user can download a data set and then share it with many other users. And technically, it is then impossible for the publisher to know with how many users that one user who downloaded a data set actually shared it with. And therefore, let's say, monitoring number of downloads of a certain data set doesn't actually speak about the actual usage of the data in the wild. One other topic I want to talk about regarding motivation to publish open data is, well, open data is actually not for everyone. It is not for general public. It is for technically savvy users, so analysts, journalists, computer scientists, technical students, and so on and so forth. Those are people who are technically educated and can work well with the published data. And they can build products on top of the data. And those are the products that are then used by non-technical consumers, the general public. But it is important to distinguish these two cases, because when we are talking about open data and open data quality, we are talking about quality for the technically savvy users, not for non-technical consumers. They are the users of the products based on open data, not the open data itself. Now, these were two things about motivation to publish open data that I wanted to mention. But now I want to talk a little bit about some additional technical artifacts that accompany publishing data as open data, such as documentation, machine readable schemas, and so on. And specifically, I want to talk about how to actually design the distribution of a certain data set. Because when a publisher is given the task to publish some data, typically they have two options, or two main options on how to do that. And one is via a bulk download, which means publish all your data in a single file, accessible via the web, and your users can then download the data as one big file and do something about that. This is sometimes viewed as a little bit uncomfortable, especially for big data sets. However, This way of publishing data actually enables most use cases, because anyone can download the whole data set and they can do whatever they need to do with it. They can keep a fresh copy of the data. They can build an index on top of the data to make searching through the data faster, and so on and so forth. It is up to the data user basically to work with the data, and they can do anything they want. For some use cases, the bulk download may be inefficient when, for instance, the file is big and the user is actually interested in one record from the whole big file. Then it is really inefficient to download everything just to have a look at one record. Or for frequently updated data, it might be, again, inefficient to download the whole data set again and again and again. And if those are the cases and the publisher wants to address those, then they can think about APIs and actually giving access to the data through APIs. But when talking about APIs, they are always tailored to some use cases, such as the already mentioned use case get info about one item, or there may be some filtering use cases, such as list all items with labels starting with A or something like that. For that, we can surely build an API. However, publishing data only through an API may actually prohibit some use cases, such as downloading the whole data set, which may be even impossible when the API is not designed for it. So the takeaway from this should be that when publishing data, it should almost always be published as a bulk download first, and then if there is enough budget and maybe some use cases that need to be optimized, there should be also an API available. Now, I'll move to another layer of the open data publication process, and those are web technologies. Open data is data published on the web, which is built on web technologies. Every data publisher already has, let's say, a web presentation, a website, using most of those web technologies. However, it seems that in some cases, the web technologies are enough for web pages, but they are not used properly to actually serve open data. This leads to some technical issues when publishing data on the web. I'll just quickly mention 5 of those techniques, let's say, that are often misconfigured or used incorrectly when serving open data over the web. One of those technologies is the HTTPS protocol, which is the secure version of the protocol used to serve web pages and files over the web. And often enough, the publisher is under the impression that when they go to their website and there is this lock symbol in the address bar of the web browser, HTTPS is configured correctly, and that's it. Unfortunately, often enough, this is not the case. So what is enough for browsing using a web browser might not be enough to actually access open data from an application developer's point of view. Fortunately, there are tools that will help you assess the quality of HTTPS implementation on your web server, and all you need to do is use them. And there are other tools which help with the actual proper configuration of web servers. Another technique that is still often enough not addressed is IPv6, which is the second internet protocol used on the current web. In the future, it will actually dominate the web. And it would be nice if open data was served both using IPv4, the original internet protocol, and IPv6, the newer one, especially in the role of a public administration or an open data publisher. This is something that should be supported so that potential clients, which are IPv6 only, are not prohibited from accessing open data. Another technique I want to talk about or mention quickly is the cross-origin resource sharing technique. This one helps or makes possible for applications running in web browsers, and there are more and more applications running in web browsers these days, to access open data published by open data publisher who is different from the application developer. So again, it is quite technical, but it is the most overlooked technique that should be present when publishing open data. One of the questions asked earlier was about compression. It mentioned zip files as a technique for compressing files. And indeed, in data.apa, there is support for this. So you can publish a zip file and people can download the zip file. But in that case, they need to decompress the file before they can actually use it. And often enough, zip files are misused for bundling a bunch of files into one file, instead just compressing a file to reduce its size. On the web, in the HTTP protocol, there is support for HTTP level compression, which has a huge benefit in the fact that it is transparent to the client. The user doesn't know that compression is used. However, it is used, and then bigger open data files can be transferred faster. And since many of the open data formats are text-based, they are greatly compressible, let's say, so they will benefit greatly from the compression. And when configured correctly, the web server can serve the file compressed, but the client will actually see it decompressed and doesn't have to do anything before the actual usage of the file. Finally, the last thing or technique from the web technologies that is often misconfigured is the actual header in the HTTP protocol, which says in which data format the served file is in. There is a list of those formats managed by IANA, and every resource on the web should indicate on the using the HTTP protocol in which format the resource is in, and this often enough doesn't work correctly. So those were the 5 technical things that are often overlooked when talking about open data publication. Next, I will move on to the already mentioned cataloging of open data. Now, if you want to make open data discoverable, they need to be present or recorded in some kind of a data catalog. Already we mentioned data.apa. The typical use case for cataloging, or a typical situation, is that a data publisher runs their own data catalog, and that data catalog should have a machine-readable API compatible with data.apa, so that other data catalogs can actually harvest this one and take the metadata about the data sets and pass it on through the data catalog hierarchy. On top of that hierarchy, there is data.europa EU in the European Union, but below there are national data catalogs and then maybe regional data catalogs, and all those need to be able to access the APIs of the catalogs used by the organizations. So it is not enough to have a list of data sets on a web page. It is human readable, but it is not machine readable, and therefore it doesn't help with discoverability. So when implementing a data catalog of an organization, its machine readable API has to be in place and compatible with data.apa. Now I will move on to the area of feedback processing. So you are in the situation, or we are in the situation, when we have our data already published, and now we receive some feedback on how well or not well we actually do it. And here it is important to distinguish 2 basic kinds of open data consumers, because their feedback and how to process it may differ greatly. The first kind is what I like to call a power user. This one is very technically competent, and they have a good overview of the open data or even closed data ecosystem and situation around them. They typically know all the data publishers or data owners. They know which data each publisher has. And this means that they do not feel the need to actually be able to discover the publisher or their data sets. They typically have a use case for the data that a potential data publisher has, and therefore they do not even need a proper documentation of the data set. They know the context of the data, so they do not need links to other data sets because they already know all this about the data which is to be published as open data. And they are able to deal with many of the data quality problems that we mentioned today, which means that they will not, they will give you feedback like, yeah, it doesn't matter in which data format you publish the data, just publish it, I will deal with it. Or it doesn't matter the quality of the implementation, just make the data available and I can deal with all the problems. Well, this is the case for the power users, but then we have another and much bigger group of users that we should focus on, and those are the novice or potential users. They do not know that the data publisher or the data owner exists, so they need to discover them. And they do not know which data the publisher has, so they need to discover that too. So they need the data to be registered in data catalogs, otherwise they will not find it. They do not know the data, so they require the data to be documented properly, otherwise they will not know what is in the data and they will simply not use it. They do not have a use case for the data, and they do not have the motivation to, let's say, jump through hoops for it. So when the data is published badly or with poor quality, they will just not use it and to move on to doing something else. And they do not know the context of the data, so they will benefit from proper documentation, either human readable or even machine readable context of the data in the form of linked data and the RDF data format. And this group is much bigger, and it is actually not visible right away to the data publishers, because one property of the power users typically is that they are also very active in social networks, and therefore the data publisher may get the idea that the power users are actually the only users of their data, and therefore they should somehow focus on their feedback only, and they do not see the motivation for improving the data quality when the power user tells them, yeah, it is okay, just make it available and I will deal with all the problems. Well, this is why I discuss this and point out that it is actually important to talk about data quality so that you can get more and more users of your data. And another thing I want to talk about feedback processing is that some of the pieces of feedback you may get actually might not be relevant, or might come from just lazy consumers. This is the case when you publish, let's say, data in some format and some users ask you for the same data in another format or a subset of the data and so on. And in that case, it is okay to say, hey, you are able to do this yourself. Nothing prevents you from doing it technically, so I will not deal with your feedback. But this is, of course, not all feedback. Some feedback really points to real obstacles on the publisher's side, such as missing data, low data quality, and so on. And this, of course, is worth the effort of dealing with. The last thing I will talk about is experience we got from evaluation of data quality criteria of when a publisher actually publishes some open data. I have an anonymous example here, the Ministry of ABC. And let's have a look at those two reports about the data quality. They basically say the same thing, and that is that 3 out of 6 criteria were not fulfilled by that said ministry. However, when you took a look at the left-hand side report, it has 3 green ticks and the right-hand side has 3 red crosses. Well, typically, and it might be just specific to Czechia, but when the management sees this report, the left one, they will pat the open data team on the back and say, job well done, we do not need to be perfect, 3 out of 6 is perfectly okay, and everyone will be content, but the 3 issues with data quality will not be addressed. On the other hand, when there are 3 red crosses next to the name of the ministry, the management doesn't like this and takes action and says, you need to fix this. We do not want any red crosses next to our name. So sometimes it is actually more beneficial to point out what someone does wrong than praise them for what they do well. And that's it from my side. So now it is time for Q&A.
Thanks a lot, Jakob. I believe we now have again a question and answer. And I would like, Jakob, there were some questions during your presentation. So I put them above just to take those and give you a chance to respond to them. And one is, what kind of data is then for the general public? I believe this goes into your introduction, Samuel.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent question. And by general public, I mean really anyone. So one thing that I didn't emphasize enough is, and it was already said today, when you publish your open data, first and the first thing you do is to publish the data in an open format, which is not for the general public. But nothing prevents you from, in addition, publishing the data in an Excel file, if you presume that there are some users who would appreciate that, or even accompany the data with a visualization or an application showing the data. And those are products usable by the general public, but they should be published in addition to the open data, so that basically anyone can process the open data and create those products for the general public. It can be done by the publisher, but the primary responsibility of the publisher is to publish the data, not for general public, and the products on top of that for general public, that is optional.
Thanks a lot. Then there is another question. What about structured data on a website like RDFA or JSON LD script?
Yes, that is one of the ways of actually publishing even link data, which is the 5-star data, by providing RDFA annotations directly in HTML pages. But then again, this is kind of the API way of access of giving access to the data, because if I want to, let's say, download the whole data set, I would somehow need to be able to download the data embedded in the web pages from all the web pages. And that is basically, or that means asking for each one of those web pages, which might be inconvenient. And in that case, I would consider as a data publisher to actually go through the pages, collect all the data and publish it as an RDF dump in addition to providing the embedded data directly in the pages.
Thanks a lot. And there was one more question during your presentation. It moved up. Should you use content negotiation?
Definitely, because one of the most prominent cases of content negotiation is that we have a URL of something, and when we access it through a web browser, we get an HTML representation, which is what most people expect when they see a URL. But when we are application developers, with the same URL, we can ask for machine-readable data and get that machine-readable data in many formats. And this is really important so that we can choose in which format, either human-readable or machine-readable, we get the representation of the resource that we ask for using a URL.
Okay. There's one more, but would like to go to another question that meanwhile has some more thumbs up. But maybe, Jakob, I will also hand over to you, because the question is, the image formats are recommended to be avoided. But what image formats are to be used when sharing real images as open data? And this is actually a question where I would need to look up and investigate a bit. Maybe, Jakob, you also have an answer to that.
Sure.
A recommendation?
Yes. So what we have seen in the slides with some of the formats for images not recommended is that they should not be used for structured data. So for data which is in the form of a table or a tree, such as an XML file or JSON file, those should not be converted into images, but this relates typically to tables. So when you are serving tabular data, it should be in a machine readable format, which means in a format that allows users to actually work with the table as with the table. And that is when image formats are not recommended. But of course, the requirement of open data is that the format that is used to publish some data, including images, is open. And there are, of course, image formats that are open and recommended for use when you really want to serve images and not hide tables in them. And in that case, the open formats include, well, I can mention the modern ones, such as, let's say, WebP format, which is from Google, but it has been made open, or the AVIF format, which is the most modern one for images and videos. But also the older one like GIF and Ping, I think, were made open in the end. So all those are fine. I would have some questions about JPEG actually, but if it fulfills the definition of an open format, then it is also fine.
Thanks a lot, Jakob. Another question, there's also a question about, is DCAT for geospatial? So DCAT AP, you can also put spatial data in there, but considering geospatial data, there's also GeoDCAT AP. And I was trying to find the link. I will maybe in a minute paste it in the chat, but there's GeoDCAT AP, and also for statistical metadata and data, there's StatDCAT AP you can use. Do we have open data competences?
Right, I think this we'll do one last question and then one.
Yeah, okay. Do we have open data competences frameworks? And Giuseppe, I would like to hand over to you if you know that.
Yes, well, if on the publication office in data.europa.eu, we do publish a lot of guidelines, as we also mentioned, with the metadata quality, but also with the formats that could be used. For the frameworks, I will need to double check, but again, depending on the users, that if you send us an email on our functional mailbox, we will come back to you with exactly what we have, all the information and content that are available and accessible from our website, also our work. So yes, we will. If you send us an email on the functional mailbox, which I will post now on the chat, we'll be right there and get back to you.
Thanks a lot.
Perfect. So thank you everyone for this really active webinar. Lots of questions from every participant. Also, thank you so much for our speakers. Now on Slido, if you would like to just share one word or line, depending on your experience today, just to gather the overall experience that everyone had on this event, it'd be really nice. I will write my own word as well, to get to share my thoughts about this. I guess eye-opener, great, insightful. I think this is all extremely good feedback for us. It's important for us to understand how you approach this. I want to thank you again. Thanks again, all the speakers for joining us, for giving us these different perspectives. And also, I would like to let you know about our future webinars that will happen. As we mentioned, this is a webinar for data providers. This is our second webinar of a series. The third one will happen on the 18th of November, as looking at the legal openness. So today we looked at the technical, and on this 18th of November, we'll look at the legal openness. Also extremely interesting, and looking forward for you to join that one as well. But if you cannot stay without us, if you want to follow data.europa Academy, we also have another webinar coming up next week on the trends in geospatial data. This is a topic that is highly developing also on data.europa.eu, our portal. And the webinar itself would feature an active discussion with the audience, so that you can also give your feedback on our portal and guide us through the future ways on how we can approach this rapidly growing type of data. Following that webinar, there will be a report coming out, therefore join it in order to give your insight, also learn more about geospatial data. Well, thank you very much. One last thing, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's extremely important that you do provide for us your feedback. Your feedback makes us improve. It's a good way for us to understand what you like, what you didn't like, but also how we can move forward with our series of data providers webinars. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and you can find all the links on the chat in case you can scan the QR code. Perfect. And one last slide. You can follow us on social media. As we mentioned, we had the Datathon yesterday, so you can find a lot of nice posts on that, the live event. But also we post news pieces, posts about open data across Europe and the European Union. It's, if you're a fan of open data, which if you're joining this webinar, I am absolutely sure you are, you will enjoy our content. So thank you everyone. Thank you to the speakers again. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Inma. And hope you have a really nice Friday, end of the week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.